So guys, we're back here in the Carrick Centre and we're going to do today's workshop on archaeological survey and planning, and we'll be running through a few various different things. We'll be talking about how we survey sites and indeed why we do. Once they're surveyed, how we use the grid that's been put in by a surveyor to do archaeological planning and capture coordinates. And we'll also be talking, we've mentioned it in other videos, but we're going to come back to it, why sometimes paper is better than digital and why we still need archaeological plans. So let's begin with just sort of looking at this area here. As I said, we're inside in the Carrick Centre. Normally we use this when it's teeming rain and the students can't go out to the site. It's only about 50 metres away. Or also for community archaeology sort of events we do with children, etc. And you can see a series of features, so you need a grid to plan these. Okay? The normal thing that would happen now is you get an archaeological surveyor or surveyor to come in and drop in a grid with a total station or a GPS, which is normally what we do as well. But we are going to show you how to use tapes. And there's pros and cons to using a GPS, and there's pros and cons to using tapes. One of the obvious cons for tapes is they don't deal well with slopes because they have to be kept on a flat axis. And they don't deal well with wind, and it's windy, very windy outside today, which is one of the reasons why we're inside, okay? So your surveyor will come in and he'll set a grid over the site. And by a grid, I will mean points, normally at either 5 or 10 metres, but not always. It depends on the context of that you're doing your work in, of known values on those points, all relative to each other. So they will be along eastings and they'll be along northings, or X's and Y's, just the same as in orienteering and cartography, etc., etc. Okay? You use those points then to capture or to plan or to draw your site. Okay? A surveyor will normally start, not always, but he'll normally start, if possible, in the southwest corner. And there's a good reason for that, is that our human mind finds it easier to add than subtract. So if he starts in the southwest corner, so north is this way, okay? In real terms and for the purposes of today's demonstration. If he starts in the southwest corner, I'm in the southwest corner here. Okay, you're assuming all your archaeology is going that way. So we've assessed all our archaeology. We know there's no more going this way. He'll put in his first peg down this end. So everything is in plus terms. So if I want to put another peg in here, I'm adding on to my north. If I go to this way, I'm adding on to my east. And I'm not trying to subtract any values. It just makes life a little bit easier, okay, if that much makes sense. The second thing you'll normally do, so imagine this is our first peg down here that he's putting in. You will very rarely see a surveyor put in a peg with the value 0, 0. So that's 0 metres east, 0 metres north. And there's a very obvious reason for that, but I'm still going to say it. You always put the peg in the southwest corner where you think the site is all extending this way, but if you get it wrong and you have to go a little bit this way or a little bit that way, you don't want to be dealing with minus values. You want to be in plus values all the time. So if possible, you want to be able to always add your values, so always be going north and east, and you never want to be going into minus. No one wants to read a coordinate like minus 998 east, minus 1012 north. It just doesn't make sense, okay? Most archaeological sites, when they'll set out their grid, will deal in what we call local values or local grid coordinates. So if we were to use national grid values in our pegs, it would be very long and very unyieldy and very hard to deal with. So we put a local grid in that we understand relative to national grid. So we plan everything on our local grid, but when we superimpose it or put it into a computer, we can lay it in any way into any other graphics, any other spatial program we want. So the first peg that I would normally put in, I'd normally give 1,000 east, 1,000 north, typically. You might have to change that depending on the site, but that means you have a kilometre of leeway in any direction. I mean, let's face it, how many sites are going to go a kilometre in a direction that you thought there was no archaeology? It's very unlikely to happen, okay? So this point is 1,000 east and 1,000 north, okay? So that's sort of the premise of getting a site surveyed in. I will, in a few minutes, also set up and show you how to do the Pythagorean theorem and set out additional pegs using tapes, but we're going to assume these points have been put in by a professional surveyor and that we don't have to use tapes at this moment, okay? So you take your tape and you get a clip. All right, in fact a couple of clips. All sorts in here, so now, oh, there's one more. Sorry, it was tangled up there. You can see that the pegs that our surveyor's put in, he's put a nail on top of each of them. So that's obviously in the central point of the peg, and that's where the coordinate is correct from, not from the edge of the timber. You will also see a variety of different pegs used on site. Timber are fantastic, especially for greenland pasture sites. Sometimes you have to use something more robust, maybe like rebar or metal pegs to get through rubble or to get through archaeology on urban sites. So archaeological techniques do tend to vary an awful lot based on context, okay? So you get your tape and you clip it off on your peg. Make sure it's on securely. There will be an metric and inches. Obviously in Europe we always deal in metric. So everything I'm telling you today is in metric, no feet and inches, please. So make sure that your metric is facing up. You stretch out your tape and bring it to the next peg. You make sure that it's taut, and this is why it's great to be inside, because if we were outside now it would be blowing this way and that way, which obviously makes it very inaccurate. And you also always want to make sure your tape is straight. So this is where tapes are a bit limited. If there was a hummock in here or a ditch, obviously the tape would be going down and coming back up, or going up and over the hummock, and that makes it very inaccurate. But we have a nice straight level plane here, which makes it quite easy. You can see there's all sorts of different varieties of clips. Everything in archaeology is recycled from different professions. So there's a straightforward sort of bulldog clips. These are actually for sandwich bags, where you can double the tape back on itself and give it a clip as well. So I'm going to double clip it just to be safe for today, but there's a variety of different clips you can use. Clip it off. So that's double clipped, so it shouldn't slip. Doesn't mean it won't, but it shouldn't, okay? So this peg, as I said, is 1,000 east, 1,000 north, and that way is north, okay? So we have this tape set up on a direct northing, i.e. it's going from south to north. It's going on a straight north axis, okay? And the reading on this point up here is 6 meters. As I said, we normally put pegs in at 5 or 10 meter increments. On this simulated archaeological site, it's been put in at 6 for a deliberate reason. You can see there's some sort of stones here. And obviously what we're trying to teach students is best laid plans do not always work. So we wanted to put the peg in at 10 meters, but we're imagining there was a whole rubble deposit and we couldn't get it in, so we had to put it in on 6. It is brilliant when you go to a nice flat greenfield site and you can put your pegs in exactly where you want them. In reality, on archaeology sites, it doesn't always work. There's always something in the way. So you have to be flexible on how you set out your grid. You might have to put in temporary pegs just to be able to get a certain plan and then take them up again. You have to put in the pegs where they need to go effectively, okay? So now we have our tape set up, so we're going to move to how we take a coordinate and how we plot that, okay? And to do that, we use Permatrace planning sheets. So I have one on a planning board here. It's A3, white, so you can see through. Permatrace is almost slightly see-through, high durability, sort of plasticized paper. And then on the back, we have our drawing conventions, okay? And before you start doing any planning, you'll need quite a few items. Sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on exactly what you're drawing. But as a minimum, you'll need your pencil. It's normally behind my ear, it is. And you'll need a variety of these different things, depending on what you're doing. Masking tape to hold your plan to the board, especially if it's windy. Pegs, as we have sort of indicated and gone through. Hand tapes or measuring tapes, obviously to take measurements on. You may need nails and a hammer, which you either put on the top of your pegs. You'll need obviously a sharpener, okay? You'll need an eraser, and you may need a plumb bob, which we'll come back to. And depending on the sort of drawing you're doing, you may even need what we call a line level, which is a little spirit level that holds on to line, okay? And for that reason, I also have line in here as well. All right, so they are the sort of things you need to do, or need to have, I should say. Your pencil always needs to be sharp, okay, and it should also always be a hard lead pencil. So HB is out. It should be in the H categories, 2H to 4H preferably. Make sure it's sharp. The reason why we like hard lead is the softer lead tends to wash off, especially in rain. So you want a nice hard pencil that will make clear, sharp, nice, neat lines, okay? So they're the sort of things you need ready, and then you need to decide what you're going to plan, all right? And this is something about I suppose, that it really is worth pointing out that archaeological planning, to a degree, is personal, and interpretive, okay? So I could come onto the site, and this is very obvious. I'm standing on a wall. There's a wall here. There's obviously a selection of posts, and there's what looks like a grave cut here, where a bit of the fill has been taken out, but it hasn't gone down to the stage of the burial, and you can see the grave cut is stone lined, all right? So there's a series of features in here. They're very, very obvious. Most archaeological plans should look identical. But if you were planning a ditch, for argument's sake, with a large slope, I might interpret the breaks of slope slightly different to Chris or to Alan or to any other archaeologist. So the plan might vary a little bit, okay? So they do have to be scientifically accurate, but you also have to remember that there is a large degree of interpretation in them, okay? So they're not always going to be absolutely identical, right? When you're ready to start, you need to decide where to position your grid line, okay? So there's no point me putting my grid line here, right at the top of this sheet, because most of the drawing, or at least half it, extends past the grid line, so I wouldn't be able to fit it, okay? So you always want to position your grid line that there's plenty, or position your grid on the paper that there's plenty of space to be able to draw what you need to draw. Again, this is a very simple one for demonstrative purposes. It's a grid pretty much in the middle of a square box. So if I put my grid here, draw my first X to get a grid, and we'll be showing you some of this on screen, so don't worry about it. I have plenty of space to draw around, okay? We are drawing this particular drawing at a scale of 1 to 20. When I say 1 to 20, I mean that one box on the page, 1 centimetre box equals 20 centimetres on the ground. 1 to 10, one box on the page equals 10 centimetres on the ground, and you guessed it, 1 to 50, one box on the page equals 50 centimetres on the ground. You pick your scale based on the level of detail you want to capture. If it's a burial, you're going to be doing it at 1 to 20, possibly even 1 to 10, because you want to capture a high level of detail and refinement. If you're doing an overall site plan, it could even be at a 1 to 100 or a higher scale. So it depends on what the plan is intended to show, to illustrate, okay? But today we're doing it at 1 to 20, which means 5 of these boxes equal 1 metre, okay? And we're going up 6 metres. So that's 2 metres, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So my second point is there, okay? You want to label your points at this point. So 1,000 east, 1,000 north, and then obviously this one is 1,000 east because it hasn't moved in any direction east or west at all, and it's 1,006 north because we've gone 6 metres in a northerly direction, okay? So now I have represented this line on this page, okay? As I said, each centimetre box is 20 centimetres, and that's further subdivided into 10 little boxes, so each little box equals 2 centimetres. So I hope that much makes sense, all right? So now we want to start capturing features and drawing them on the page, okay? This is where all your other equipment comes in handy. So just to begin, I'm going to get a plumb bob out. There's an incredibly long line on that one. Okay, so I want to get the edge of the grave cut, okay? And I literally want to plumb down off my tape to get a perfectly straight axis. Just make sure it stops swaying. Down again. And that is 2 metres and 18. So I come up 1 metre, 2 metres, and 2 metres 18 is here. And the ever such a slight little dot, just so I can see it. But what we don't want to do is end up with something that looks like a bad version of Pac-Man, where you end up having really hard dots drawn in and a horrible drawing like that. It has to look organic, it has to look natural, okay? So 2 metres 18 is where the first point is. And the second point is 4 metres and 16. Okay, so I'll drop that one in as well. 4 metres and 16. Okay. Now, you might notice that both my numbers happened to be even there, 16, 18, that wasn't accidental. when you're calling out coordinates, so frequently you'll have someone taking the coordinates and someone else drawing, but when you're planning, be it as part of a team or be it by yourself, always call out the coordinates in numbers that make sense to the scale you're planning at. So if I was planning, and when I am planning at 1 to 20, these tiny little boxes are at 2 centimetre increments. So I can't see centimetre increments on the page, and indeed a centimetre increment is the width of a pencil, okay? So it makes much more sense to call it out in even twos now because I'm doing it at 1 to 20. If I was planning at 1 to 100, it would make more sense to call out the measurements in 10 centimetre increments because one of these tiny boxes is then 10 centimetres, okay? So there's nothing more annoying than working with someone you're planning at 1 to 100 and they're calling out measurements like 1197 and 177 because you can't see it. It's absolutely just a waste of time, okay? So I now know one edge of my grave cut is here and the other, and obviously I wouldn't be scribbling in like this normally, it's just to show it, and the other edge of my grave cut is here. So we obviously have an oval coming something around like that, okay? Now I'm going to ask for a bit of help because obviously it's very easy to get the ones on the tape yourself, but now I need to be able to get out and get the edge of the cut and put those points in. So Chris, would you give us a hand for a tick? Sure. So, normally, sorry.
First thing you're doing there then is we're marking the outer limits of the feature, in this case a grave.
Exactly, yeah. So the first thing we did was get our grid in, Surveyor did that. The second thing we did was set up our tape and position the grid line, and now we're actually using the grid line to mark actual individual features, you know. And I suppose you've prompted me into a very good tip. It's always very good visually to work from the big stuff out and work in, because you have that visual prompt. So if there's a lovely little bit of detail here, and here and here, don't start with that, because if you get the outside first, and if a coordinate is given incorrectly to you, you hear it incorrectly, you'll straight away see mistakes because you'll see, oh, that doesn't look like where it's meant to be. Yeah. You know, if you plan in too small detail to begin with, you won't see those errors, all right? So to take a coordinate, it's quite simple. You'll need your hand tape, and frequently you need a plumb bob. So basically all I want you to do, Chris, if you don't mind, is to hold the plumb bob. We're going to take this point here to get one edge, all right? So the plumb bob is only, so right down to the ground, the plumb bob is only to extend up the vertical plane so you can get the tape across. And if you hold it with the other hand, hold the tape to the plumb bob there, please, Chris. Okay. Now, one thing I want you to notice is that I have kept both tapes in a flat axis, and indeed that's why we have the plumb bob. Okay, so take away the plumb bob, Chris, for a second. If I was to try and take the point like that, this tape is slanted. Okay, so that's inaccurate, and indeed if I was to go that way, it's also inaccurate. Okay, so we'll go back in, we'll get that point. So that's the reason for the plumb bob. Whoever is helping you take the measurements always holds the plumb bob, and hold the tape to it with your hand as well if you can, please, Chris. Yeah, they hold those two instruments, and the handle of the tape always goes with the person who's reading. Okay, now we'll show you a close-up shot of this in a second, but you basically slide this tape up and back, okay? And when we show you the close-up, you will see that the reading on the hand tape is changing where it crosses the long tape as I move it forward and back. And when it's at its minimum, that's a direct right angle, and that's what you want, is a perfect right angle here. Because this is on a direct northing, you want to be going in a direct easting. You want to be going out, okay? So it's actually a lovely measurement. It's exactly 3 meters and on this tape, and it's 46 centimeters on that tape, okay? So your tape's flat, a perfect right angle here. They're the two key things to remember. And you achieve that right angle by sliding this up and down, up and down. So 3 meters and 46. You will find in practice when you're doing this that you will get to see right angles in your head extremely quickly. But if I take my measurement off a right angle, it's not going to be accurate. If I take my measurement with the tape slanted up or down, it's also not going to be accurate, okay? So here we have 3 meters and 46 centimeters. And again, you just plot. So we come up 1 meter, 2 meters, 3 meters. We've gone 3 meters further north, and we've gone 46 centimeters out east, okay? And if we repeated that exercise on this side, which I've already done, so I happen to know, but at 3 meters, it was 22 centimeters out. So now we have the 4 points of our grave cut. and we've basically got that oval shape coming in for the grave cut, okay? So our grid line and our grave cut. If you're planning this for, in a real context, each of these stones would be planned, okay? So if I was planning that, I would be taking coordinates probably on sort of 3 corners of each stone, and you'd be building up an awful lot more detail and drawing in each of the stones as you go around, okay? But that is how you take what we call an offset measurement to start an archaeological plan, okay? These things behind me are called planning frames. It's probably too much detail for the context of a 1-week online program, but we'll at least tell you the premise of them because they're very, very simple but very effective. They only work, certainly as they're set up like this, they only work in the scale of 1 to 20. So you put them directly underneath your tape, and you will take a plumb bob. Yeah, that'd be great.
The edge of that, Dennis, is with your tape measure.
Tape measure, yeah, absolutely. And you will plumb down until, in this instance I'm starting at 1 meter, but you can start anywhere, but you will plumb down until you're perfectly positioned from 1 to 2 meters. Okay. Which this one nearly now is. Certainly close enough for the purposes of demonstration. So, effectively, and I'm going to draw, you never ever draw the limits of your planning frame in, but I'm just doing it to make it easier for you to visualize what I'm doing. Now drawn in on that board is the limits of this planning frame, okay? And now I can draw whatever I see. So you can see that 2 boxes up and 2 in, 1, 2 up and 2 in. There's a post hole here, about that size. 2 boxes up on the line, there's another post hole here. So it's a very, very quick way of planning, but it does take a large degree of skill skill in terms of being able to see and understand scale. That you can see that roughly the size of that post hole relative to the size of that little box.
You obviously don't draw in the frame because it looks like a feature.
No, you never ever draw on the frame, and it'll look horrible over time. Yes. All right, they're great for things like tile surfaces and cobble surfaces. They'll only work if it's flat. Okay, so the planning frame has to be flat. So you will see very fancy examples that have little legs that extend down to keep it flat. On most sites, you'll see them propped up with kneeling pads, buckets, whatever works, just to keep this on a flat axis.
And again, you'd use a small spirit level just to get that level or something?
Yeah, I've seen spirit levels used or visually, just that it's visually flat. So we're very lucky, it's a sandpit, so it's flat. The other thing you have to do is you can't draw obliquely. So if I'm drawing here, in my eye, it looks different to how it actually is. You have to be over each side. So move around the planning frame and be over each side. Where they work great as well, as I said, when you're doing something like a cobble surface or something similar, and as you get more skilled in planning, you can actually flip them. So if I was finished with this frame, I would stick 2 nails in to mark the 2 corners, and then I would flip the frame over and reposition this side on these 2 nails. Okay?
Kind of walk it.
Exactly. And you can walk it, if you're a very skilled planner, up to 4 or 5 times without losing accuracy. If you're starting off, sometimes you need to reset up loads of more grid lines to get it repositioned, okay? So the 2 basic ways you can capture archaeological measurements on paper is the offset, which we taught here, and with a planning frame, which we looked at here. And you use that to build up, obviously, an archaeological drawing. And we're going to be showing examples of drawings of burials, and some will be provided in your pack. You will frequently see burials done just by offsets. You will also see people using planning frames for them. Sometimes they may even use photogrammetry, or very commonly they'll use photogrammetry, which is a scaled version of a photo. There's merits in all the different techniques. When you're drawing the burial, you obviously want to capture as much detail as possible. How the hands are positioned, how the feet are positioned, are there any grave goods, is there anything accompanying or interesting within the grave itself, okay? Again, when you're planning grave cuts, a burial would typically have at least 3 plans. So you'll have a pre-excavation plan where you can probably see nothing except maybe a dark circle of soil against a yellow backdrop before you've even dug into it. You'll have what is effectively a mid-excavation where you can see the burial laid out, and you'll have a post-excavation when there's nothing left except the depression, the grave cut that the burial was in, all right? And you will then also, for each of these stages, take archaeological levels or Z measurements, but that's from this instrument and that's in an entirely different video, so we won't do that now, okay? So that's how to take offsets, it's why we put a grid in the way we do, and it's how to use a planning frame, okay? Let's go back to paper. Right, so we get asked questions the whole time of why do we still draw this way? Why is stuff committed to paper? Why do we not get everything picked up in photogrammetry or a survey? There is lots of reasons for that, which we'll come back to. But first we'll go through the information we expect to be captured on the paper. So this drawing on permatrace film is used the world over. It's quite common. It lasts a long time. All archaeologists will capture certain information on the board or on the film itself. The only change, I guess, with us is that we have an awful lot of it prompted and put down at the bottom here because it's a student excavation and because we're teaching students online to make sure that they get everything. So we'll get one of these popped up on your screen. Alan will kindly do that for us. But just to go through the sort of information we expect you to capture with the plan. So you've now got your points, you've drawn in your grave cut, but what sort of other information are you expected to put in? So you're expected to put in the site name. Officially, this site that we're on today is called Newtown, also known as Carrick, so you'd put in the name. You'd be asked to put in the permit number or the excavation number that's given out by the legislative authority or the state. So 17E0318 is the number for Carrick, which we've discussed in a previous video, so I hope you remember that. The drawing number and the sheet number, and again we're asked, why is there 2? Well, if we're doing a large plan of a very large area at a close enough scale, like 1:20, like a pre-ex plan for the whole site, a single drawing could extend up to over 20 sheets, lots and lots of different sheets. Equally, if we're drawing very small little features like stake holes, which end up, the plan only is that size in total, there's no point having a sheet wasted with such a little drawing on it. So there could be 6 drawings on one sheet, or one drawing could extend over 20 sheets. So one tells you how many drawings have physically been drawn, the other one tells you how many sheets they're on, how many sheets you should find. The drawing type, there's a few different types of drawings in archaeology and in life, obviously. But what we're doing is a bird's eye view or a plan view. You could also have a section drawing, which would be showing the different layers in a ditch or in a pit, a profile and elevation, etc. Okay, some of you should already be aware of this, I'm sure, if you've been on sites. The feature numbers. So if you remember from our previous videos, everything is given feature numbers based on events, but we've talked about that previously. So this wall, for argument's sake, if this was cutting 1, could be feature 1001. The grave cut could be 1002. The fill of the grave cut 1003, etc., etc. But you list all the features that are on it. The grid references, 1000 east, 1000 north, 1000 east and 1006 north. Every drawing must have a minimum of 2 grid points. This is really, really important. Preferably 4, but a minimum of 2, because if they don't, you can't join them together or lock them together. So if I only put 1 point on this drawing, when this goes back into the lab and people are trying to join the drawings together and make sense of them, they don't know if it's orientated like that, or like that, or like that, and they don't have 2 points to lock them in. So a minimum of 2, preferably 4, okay? You will see in future drawings that we're going to talk about temporary benchmark backsites. They relate to data you take for your level, but that will be in a future video. But just remember that they do have to be entered on your drawing sheets. The scale you drew it at, in this case 1:20, the date, whatever the date was drawn on, and who it was drawn by. And if that's multiple people, put in multiple initials, okay? Some of this information gets replicated. We'll pop this up on screen briefly so you can see it, in a drawing register. So every single different archive material type and every material type like ceramics and fines and drawings and photographs, all these different things have their own registers. so you know exactly what you should have, what's been generated by the excavation, okay? So some of this information gets replicated in the drawing register, all right? The other things then that we just have here are just prompts to help students. So there's a remember box on our sheets. Did you remember your grid points? Did you remember a drawing key? And this is actually something that's quite important. We'll pop this one up for you as well, guys, okay? Most of the drawing standards we used are inspired by the Museum of London archaeological standards that are used throughout Ireland, a lot of Britain, some of Northwest Europe, and it's almost like a drawing language. It's a language we use that anyone who's not on the site can still understand. So there's various different conventions. We cannot go into all these on an online program. What we can do is we can provide you our conventions, and we can stick a link up on the video of where you'll find more detail from the Museum of London archaeological standards. That's very easy for us to do, okay? But if you think of it very much as a language, so if I draw on site and I give my drawing back to Alan in the lab who's digitizing it to put it in the report or publication, that he can understand the types of things I'm trying to say, okay? So one of my favorite conventions, to give one example, is what I call the heartbeat, which basically means the edge of the feature was unclear. So I wasn't sure where the edge of the feature was, so I use a heartbeat symbol to say it's somewhere around there, but I'm not sure exactly where. And in fact, the depth of the heartbeat was, just to give you a very quick example, for argument's sake, we have some sort of that. Will that pick up, Alan? Yeah. We have some sort of a feature, okay, that starts here, and another edge, say approximately there, okay? So this is yellow soil, and by the time we've gotten up here, it's brown soil, and we're not sure exactly where it started. The heartbeat would be as wide as where the zone you're not clear about. So it indicates that something changed within the middle of that, okay? We'll see how that looks on camera. We may put a graphic up to help you understand that, but that's just to give one example. What the key is, the drawing key, is anything that is not a standard symbol. So if you found something that we don't have a standard symbol for, you explain it on the drawing, okay? And people understand what it is, just like map key, like anything else, okay? Then it also asks you, have you referenced adjoining drawings? So this drawing is, for argument's sake, drawing 1001. So it's the first drawing from cutting 1, and it's on sheet 1001, okay? But it joins with another drawing over here, okay? So that would be sheet 1002. And have you referenced that this drawing joins with that drawing? So this is just register and good record keeping and good keeping things right. Have you used standard symbols and annotations? And have you taken levels, meters above sea level, and calculated them back to national grid, I guess, or national meters above sea level, which is using this instrument, which is the future video. So we're certainly not going to go into that today, all right? Again, because it's a teaching dig, we have an extra checkbox on ours of have one of the staff, typically myself or Richard, have we checked the drawing? Has it been scanned? And what date was it scanned? Just before I come back to the scanning, you'll see a little cruciform pattern here in the bottom left, and that basically lets you know what drawings this joins to. So this is drawing 1001, it joins with 1002, 1003, okay? And then if it didn't join with anything else on the other sides, put in a not applicable. So NA all the way around, okay? I now know when I go back looking for this drawing that it consists of 3 sheets. There's one up there and there's one over there, okay? So it tells you exactly how the drawing comes together. The reason why I said I'd come back to scanned, everything we commit to paper lasts for a very long time, all right? As long as the paper doesn't get burnt or go missing or get robbed. So if you scan things very regularly, you have a backup digital copy and you have your paper copy. And this brings me back to why do we draw at all, okay? So we talk about this at length with the students because they sort of sometimes see this as quite an antiquated recording method when we have photogrammetry, when we have GPS, when we have total stations. There are very practical reasons to record this way as well. It's very cheap. I mean, a high-end GPS can be 20,000 plus euro, so you're not going to buy 30 of them for 30 students digging on site simultaneously. A tape is an awful lot cheaper. We've talked about the drawbacks of tape, of them not working well in wind, and of them not being good with slopes. But the real beauty of them is all this gets committed to paper, okay? So to whoever's watching this video, if I was to mention Betamax tapes to you, How many of you even know what Betamax tapes are? I certainly remember them. Floppy disks, zip drives. How long is digital data going to be around? Stuff that we could open very, very easily. I remember backing up my master's thesis in floppy disk. It was all the rage at the time. It's now very hard to open. And if you're digging a site that is thousands of years old, you have to make sure that your archive lasts a long time. So archaeology is controlled destruction, effectively, of what's there. So if we don't have an archive, why are we disassembling the site? We should be doing it for a very good, robust research agenda, but we have to make sure that the records we take are around for future generations. If you look back at archaeological publications that were put out only 2 generations ago, books are fantastic and they have to be done, don't get me wrong, as are reports, but our knowledge and our understanding moves on so quickly, we have to leave an archive that future researchers can go back and reinterpret. That's my big hang up with digital data. In 60 years, if we were to only record digitally, would future researchers be able to come back and access some of it, all of it? Would it all have ended up on a hard drive in my attic and that my kid throws in a skip after I pass away? Who knows? My point is that paper, in terms of archival qualities, can't be replicated. In terms of speed and sometimes accuracy, digital is obviously better. The only other thing I like about paper archive is the interpretive personal touch, where you can actually get a nice drawing and almost interpret as you draw, which is very, very hard to achieve with a dump stick. So you might get a very accurate drawing of the site, but maybe not the same level of refinement or interpretation, okay? So there are the sheets. The only other thing we want to show you is how to lay out a grid with tapes. As I said, even we do most of our laying out grids with GPS, but it's still important that you know how to use the tape, because I have been caught quite a few times in Australia especially, where you get no satellite reception and GPS doesn't work, or your battery goes dead. We've even had a couple of technical issues today. So these things happen, but a tape very rarely will let you down unless it physically snaps, okay? So if you know the basics, it's always a good fail-safe in case your digital devices don't work. Okay, so we're just mentioned up in the Carrick Centre about setting out a grid by tape and how it can be a little bit less accurate than using digital survey devices. There's been a slight break in the wind, so we decided to try and get outside. So we're down at the monastery site and we're going to show you quickly how to set out a grid using tapes, in case you don't have a digital device or surveyor available, and then probably we'll have to boot it back up if the rain or wind comes back in, okay? So just to recap, the church behind us, I know you can't see it, that's on an east-west axis. So what that basically means is this is the point in the southwest corner of the site. As we said, we always like to start off in the southwest corner if possible. All our archaeology will be planned this way with the church behind us. So this point is 1000 east, 1000 north, and we put our first point in 5 meters north. Sorry, our second point in 5 meters north of the first. So that is 1000 east, 1005 north, okay? Setting out with tapes is extremely simple. It's based on simple school maths, or the Pythagorean theorem, which is a squared equals b squared plus c squared. So on this site, we want to put in a 5 meter grid. So this is our a squared, okay, which is 5 meters apart. We'll be putting our b squared up this way, another 5 meters out. So of course our diagonal coming across has to be a and b and the square root of it. So if this is 5 and that's 5, 25 plus 25 is 50, and the square root of 50 is 7.07. When we started out in archaeology, we used to do everything in 5s, 3s and 4s because it was the only maths we could remember, and there was no smartphones or calculators. You can do it whatever interval you want now, because basically it's very quick to get the calculation on your phone. 5s and 10s are still very common on site. So as I said, 7.07 for the diagonal of a 5, it's 14.14 for the diagonal of a 10 meter square. That's also very handy for anyone doing test pit archaeology in America, Canada, Australia, because it's 4.14 for a 1 meter square test pit. So they're two good ones to remember. But other than that, you can do it to any interval you want as long as you have a smartphone on site. So Chris and Alan, I might get you guys to give me a hand for a second. Chris, if you could just hold the tape to there. I'll bring it off with me. A mallet and additional pegs. We're using surveyor's arrows for this, guys. Of course, you might be gridding the site with wooden pegs or rebar in reality. bring them up. I know I'm going up somewhere around here anyway. Get my 7.07 on this tape, which is here. Get my 5 meters on this tape and put the two of them directly aligned in together. Again, you don't want to be on hummocky ground. You don't want the tapes going up or down. You want them nice and flat. And as I said, we're doing this outside now because the wind has died down. You can see there isn't much movement on that tape. You pull them nice and taut. They're on a fairly good flat axis, so that'll be relatively accurate. Peg in the ground, mallet it in. It is literally that simple, folks. If we repeated the process the other way around with the 7.07 going that way and the 5 coming up from Chris behind you, Alan, we'd have our other 5 meter grid over there, and you basically just repeat that process, extend it all over the site until you get your 5 meter grid in. Couldn't be any simpler, but I hope that makes some sort of sense. So guys, we mentioned up in the Carrick Centre when we were talking about planning and survey that there's a sort of 2 or 3 different types of drawings. There's plans, which we talked about up above in the Carrick Centre. There's profiles and there's sections. And the art behind profile, or the process behind profiles and sections, is effectively the same thing. So a section, if you like, if you think of taking a slice down through something, through a bank or through a ditch, and you can see all the different layers, that's a section. A profile is something that doesn't contain something anymore. So if you're to draw the surface of a hummock, say the hummock here, you just wanted to see what the surface topography was, or if you were to draw the bottom of a ditch after you've excavated it all out just so you get the shape of it, that would be a profile, all right? And then of course an elevation is a more architectural term where you'd be drawing the actual blocks or the actual stones that have been put into a wall and seeing what the wall is constructed of. So they're all done in the same basic process. So we are going to draw, well, it's more like an elevation really of the cyst here, the Bronze Age cyst. Replica, obviously, we're in the park, so we've got out from the wind outside because the wind has stopped again, thankfully. And normally the way you would do this is a slightly more complicated one. We've chosen it because it's linked to human remains. It is a Bronze Age cyst, but also sometimes it's good to show the issues you may have to encounter or some of the problems you may have when you're doing drawings. So normally we would get 2 long ranging rods and put one in here, bang one in and bang one in over here, and we get a straight string put up on them. I'll come back to that later, and a tape lower down on the peg, all right? What we have done here instead is we put them vertically into the face here, okay? So we have 2 pegs put in. Get rid of these, I don't need them. We have 2 pegs put in, and we've set up what is actually builder's line. So builder's line is an ever so slightly elasticated string, normally used for block laying. As I said, most things are borrowed in archaeology. And you'll see when you look over here, there's a little, what we call a line level. So it's a little spirit level with hooks. You put it on the string and you make sure the string is perfectly straight. It depends which archaeologist you talk to. Some people will say these little spirit levels are accurate up to about 4 or 5 meters. Other people just trust them even over 2 meters. It's certainly accurate to a length that long. So this string is set up on a perfectly level plane, okay? If you want to do a very long one, I suggest when you're finished, you take a meter above sea level on your A point, your left-hand point, and your B point, your right-hand point. And that way you can adjust the string in a computer afterwards if they're slightly off, okay? But for this string should be perfectly horizontal, okay? It's important that the string isn't touching anything or anything isn't getting in its way. So I've brought it just a few millimeters out from the stone, and I'm making sure there's nothing touching it over there, okay? Then when I say there should be nothing touching it, equally the tape shouldn't be touching it. So if you set up a vertical peg like this one, for argument's sake, you'd have the string on the top and the tape lower down, but make sure it's not touching it. In this case, they're on different pegs, so you need to make sure that the tape is still directly below the string, okay? That these points are almost identical, or as close as is practical to get identical anyway, okay? And then you just need to take measurements. So you need all the same equipment that we talked about before. Erasers, sharpeners, your drawing board, your permatrace film, pencil, make sure your pencil is good and sharp, and a hand tape, okay? And the first thing you want to do is draw in your A and your B point. So this is our A. We're going to simply put a cross on the page, and then we'll see how far our B is, and it goes over to exactly 1.6 meters. And we're drawing this at 1 to 10. So one small square on the page equals 10 centimeters in this case, and one tiny square equals 1 centimeter. So 1.6 is obviously 16 squares out. So that's our B just here. Okay, B. So what I've represented on the page is effectively this point and this point, and of course they're on a perfectly flat or horizontal angle. Okay, so it's that line here. All right, then you simply start taking your points. So for argument's sake, if I want to get where the stone comes in at this point here, always measure from the string downward or upward and inward on the tape, but never measure downward or upward from the tape. So I'm going down 19 and I'm coming in exactly 24. So in 19, down 24. Okay, next point on the stone. In 24, up 3. So 3 above the line in this case. In 24 and up 3. So that's point on the stone. I'll get another one here. Can be slightly finicky, depending on where you're planning sometimes. So you just need to be patient. Okay, in 38, up 1. 20. And again, you're probably in a real context would take an extra point or two than I've taken on this. But that is very broadly your first stone drawn in, okay? So this first stone of the cyst, all right? You repeat that process, capturing all these different data points until you would have something resembling, obviously, the cyst grave. Another point here, and obviously your large stone will go in there. Now you'll see, obviously in real terms, you are trying to draw a flat vertical face. Sometimes you have to make a couple of practical choices of what you want to include. If you ever need to extend outward or inward, if this isn't perfectly flat, you can use a straight axis obviously to do that. So if I was trying to take this point here, I would get a ruler and push it into that point. So I'm bringing out a straight axis to the string. I hope that makes sense. You'll frequently see either people use spirit levels or a ruler with a little spirit level attached to it, all right? When you have the drawing completed, so take lots of points. This will be roughly it. We'll try and include an example or two in this presentation as well, so you can see what completed examples look like. When you have the drawing completed, you then need to lock these 2 points in and your string in to your X, Y, and Z, your eastings, your northings, and your meters above sea level. So up in the Carrick Centre, we showed you how to take offsets. You effectively take an offset on your A, and you take an offset on your B. And you get those values and work them out for whatever they might be. So for argument's sake, I'm not saying it is for here, it may be 1226.45 east, 1724.76 north, whatever that value might be, and whatever this value might be. You work out your coordinates by taking offsets, okay? Then for your string, you get your staff and you hold it just barely touching the line, not pushing it down anyway, just hovering on the line. You get your foresight on the line, as we discussed up on the Carrick Centre. You go to your datum, you take your back sight and you reduce that level. So then you have a level on this string. And obviously, if you have a level on that string, on that straight axis, you then understand absolutely the level of everything relative to it. So if I want to know the level of this point on the stone, I can calculate it relative to the level on the string. So you're capturing everything in one little drawing, okay? Lovely drawings to do. Typically they're much easier to do with one person rather than 2 or 3. It's actually easier to do with one a lot of the time. As I said, this one's slightly complicated because normally you would have 2 vertical pegs. That wasn't working out in this instance. Couple of other little tips, I guess, just that we've picked up over the years. If you are putting in vertical pegs, they have to be vertical, obviously. They can't be bowed. So for argument's sake, if this was a large vertical peg, you can picture something a bit longer than what I'm using now, be it a meter stick or whatever. And I put my string and it's bowing in as I pull it, try and get it taut, okay? You put a second peg in, lower down, right there. And you literally just put a restraining tie from one to the other. So this one is tied back to that one to pull it straight and to hold it straight, okay? Simply like that, okay? A second little tip is when you're tying them off, so we're going to imagine, snip that off. We're going to imagine we're setting up a section line here. So I'll put in my A, that's my B, okay? This is purely just for demonstrative purposes very quickly, folks. Make sure there's no vegetation touching. Tie off your A side properly. And on your B side, tie it in a loop, okay? So instead of tying it off fully, leave it in a loop. So you can slide this up and down if it's not perfectly straight, okay? Rather than having to untie, retie, slide that up and down, okay? So that's the second little tip. As I said, the string has to be taut, otherwise it'll be inaccurate. And just like we'll be speaking about with levels, it's a good idea if you're drawing, especially if it's a convoluted drawing. So an experienced archaeologist would draw this very quickly. But if you're drawing a very large section, say of a ditch with multiple fills, that's going to take hours of work or be quite an investment of work, it's a good idea to level your string straight away and take coordinates on your A and your B points pretty quickly. Because again, there's nothing more annoying than you having drawn half the drawing and then someone coming out and knocking down your pegs or knocking down your lines. It is possible to reposition where that line was based on your drawing reasonably accurately, but there still will be some level of error incurred in repositioning the line, and of course it's more work than you need to do. Whereas if you have it set up, you have it leveled, you have your coordinates captured, if it's knocked, it's easier to put up in the same place very accurately again. As I said also, the drawings can be quite simple. Like this one is relatively simple, there's not too much involved. They can be quite convoluted. We'll put up an example of a couple from the Carrick side, especially of the ditch. So I hope that makes sense. As with all the little bits of we've been saying throughout the day, and as I said at the start of the planning and survey workshop, if you have any questions on this, please include it in the interactive sessions this evening. Write it down on a piece of paper. And obviously if we were doing this in a articulated, extended burial context like in a medieval burial ground, we would be drawing profiles of all the grave cuts after they're excavated. So in short, you would be drawing something along the lines of this. The shape of the grave cut that contained the burial and the soil would have been in here, and you'd be drawing the U shape when it's finished, okay? We just decided to show a slightly more complicated or convoluted example at the Bronze Age cyst here. That's great, folks. Thanks very much. We'll move on to the next part.